of course, markets are all roiled up because of Omicron. So what really has increased the fear factor? So a couple of things that have happened. Over the weekend, there was a statement by the World Health Organization which talked about the number of cases doubling at a frenetic pace from 1.5 to 3 days in areas with community transmission. There is also a Lancet piece which talks about the RO, which is the rate at which the virus actually replicates for Omicron, possibly being as high as 10. And that is what is scaring people. Here in India, we've gone to 161 cases so far. In fact, the Health Minister, Mansukh Mandavia, spoke about it in Parliament today. Listen in.
ओमिक्रॉन केस अभी दिखाई दे रहा है। ओमिक्रॉन के सामने लड़ने के लिए भी हमने पहले से ही तैयारी रखी है। देश में ओमिक्रॉन केस बढ़े, ऐसी स्थिति में हम क्या करें? ओमिक्रॉन क्या है? ओमिक्रॉन एक डेल्टा वेरिएंट का म्यूटेट वेरिएंट ओमिक्रॉन है। देश में वेरिएंट स्प्रेड ना हो, उसकी सुरक्षा के लिए भी भारत सरकार की ओर से सतर्कता रखी गई। जिस कंट्री में वेरिएंट है उसको अलग कंट्री आइडेंटिफाई किया और एक रिस्क कंट्री के रूप में हमने उसको पहचाना। वहाँ से आने वाले कोई भी ट्रैवलर, उसको रैपिड टेस्ट हो, रैपिड RT-PCR टेस्ट एयरपोर्ट पर ही हो, उसके बाद घर पे जाए। घर पे जाने के बाद भी वहाँ वो 7 दिन तक आइसोलेट रहे। आइसोलेट रहने के बाद 7 दिन के बाद फिर से वो टेस्ट करवा ले। ऐसी SOP हमने डिक्लेयर की। मैंने स्वयं सभी स्टेट के साथ बातचीत की। मेरे सेक्रेटरी हेल्थ ने आज तक 3 बार ये वेरिएंट के संदर्भ में सभी स्टेट गवर्नमेंट को इंफॉर्मेशन मिले, उसके लिए बातचीत की। रेगुलर एक्सपर्ट टीम के साथ हम बैठ के दुनिया में क्या स्थिति है, देश में क्या स्थिति है, एक वेरिएंट की क्या इफेक्ट हो रही है, वैक्सीनेटेड लोगों पर क्या इफेक्ट हो रही है, अनवैक्सीनेटेड लोगों पर क्या इफेक्ट हो रही है, ये सारी स्थिति का हम डे टू डे आकलन कर रहे हैं।
All right, Dr. Ishwar Gilada on the show with us today. He's an infectious disease expert. I'm speaking with Professor Srinath Reddy, President of PHFI, that's the Public Health Foundation of India. Viren, Shetty, Executive Director and Group COO of Narayana Health, with us on the show. Welcome to all of you and thank you so much for joining us. Professor Reddy, let me begin with asking you to sort of put together all of the new information that has emerged over the last couple of days. Is the picture now a little clearer where we can no longer say that the Omicron is just a very mild variant? It may spread quickly but won't do much harm. Can we still say that at this point?
Well, the initial impression was that Omicron, while it is highly transmissible, is resulting in relatively milder clinical illness. However, that is still a very preliminary impression because the cases in South Africa, which were initially reported, were mostly among young people who are generally expected to have mild disease. The cases in Europe, particularly in Netherlands, were among people who were vaccinated. And in fact, some of them traveled with a valid vaccination certificate. And therefore, the question of whether the mild nature of Omicron will continue to remain as such when we have many more cases to document and analyze has been an issue. A recent report just released from the Imperial College says that perhaps we had overestimated the mild nature of the variant, but we still need to wait and see. So far, the general impression is that many cases have had relatively milder clinical illness. However, if the transmissible nature of the virus is such that very large numbers are going to be infected in any population, then you will find that the number of serious cases requiring clinical attention in hospitals is also going to rise, because even if the fraction of serious cases is diminished, if the overall numbers of infected people markedly rise, then you will still see a large number of infected people. So we cannot really brush aside the threat from Omicron.
So now the question is, what do we do about it? The reason why we keep looking at the United Kingdom is, of course, it's seeing cases increase at a phenomenal rate. The other reason is that they have used pretty much the same vaccine we have in large quantities. That's Covishield here in India and AstraZeneca there in the United Kingdom. Dr. Ishwar Gilada, is the data coming out of the UK pointing to some serious concerns? I mean, if the newest reports are saying that 2 doses of the AstraZeneca is giving about 20% protection against Omicron, just about as much as natural immunity, then we have to take that into account right now. We still have a lot of people who are unvaccinated in absolute numbers.
Tamanna, firstly, we have to understand whether Omicron is really a variant of concern. Yeah, concern is there, but we should not be panic about it. Because what we have seen, even from, say, UK, there are 37,101 cases, 104 hospitalization, and 12 deaths. If that 12 deaths are seen vis-a-vis what the Delta had done in UK, is just 0.27% deaths as against 1.3% CFR in the UK. There's a study from Hong Kong, what it says, that it is 70 times more infectious in bronchi, that is upper respiratory tract, but 10 times less infectious in lungs. That means it is going to give you mild illness, sore throat, fever, nothing beyond that. And that's what we have seen in Mumbai cases where CT scan of none of the COVID Omicron cases are having any problem. They are absolutely clear. In all earlier periods, so CT scan were showing at 10% to 70-80% affection of the lung. And lastly, what we would like to also see, that comparison was there in Malaysia between 3 vaccines: AstraZeneca, Pfizer mRNA, and Sinovac from China. And whatever breakthrough infection happened, whatever number of people died, we have seen that the least deaths were from AstraZeneca, that is Covishield in India. And the proportion is 1:2.5 to 9.5. So 2.5 times more people died of mRNA vaccine and 10 times more people died of Sinovac vaccine. So currently what we see, AstraZeneca Covishield is a better vaccine, and therefore we are not seeing much of a let-up. Leave aside Omicron, there has not been much of let-up in last 1.5 months. We are below 10,000 cases. What we would like to also see, that those people which are not touched with vaccination, we have a couple of vaccines which are approved for children by DCGI. Last 3 months before, Zycode D and Covaxin. But where are they? We should start giving as soon as possible. There is a little bit marginal hesitancy in some people for taking first dose, and there is a lot of hesitancy about second dose. So we should reduce the gap between 2 doses so that people will take vaccine. That time we reduced and increased the gap because it was a supply based rather than medical science based gap. Now there is enough supply.
Yeah.
And lastly, we need to see that none of the world whether Western world or America, they are not going to supply vaccine to Africa. It's only India can do that. And India, we have so many vaccines. And fortunately, one of the vaccine, Covax, is approved by WHO.
Let's stick to vaccine equity is important. We've spoken about it. We have spoken about it, but today we're not focusing on vaccine equity. You're absolutely right, Dr. Ishwar. Vaccine equity is important, but right now the more immediate concern for people is, are there going to be restrictions? Are there going to be a huge number of cases once again? And if there are large enough number of cases, like Professor Reddy pointed out, will then too many people land up in hospitals? Viren, let me come to you on this point. How are hospital chains gearing up for what may come next?
We learnt the lessons from Delta and prepared enough infrastructure across our group as well as all major groups, as well as nursing homes across the country, realized that one of the biggest challenges was scaling up the oxygen supply, creating ventilators and training staff to deal with that. So if we were to face something similar to Delta, the medical establishment should be able to deal with that. That we are very, very confident about. Now, of course, this new variant does seem to spread much faster than the Delta variant. However, as per whatever we've been hearing abroad, it does report milder symptoms. At this point, if we have to accept that COVID is going to be with us for a very, very long time, it really does not make sense to keep counting the number of people that are infected with it, maybe just as a general sense to get an idea of spread. But what's more important is life at the end of the day. What's more important is hospitalizations. If by doing all of this, are more people ending up in the hospital? Are more people ending up in the ICU? Instead, if we put ourselves all into a giant panic when you count 300, 700, 4,000, 20,000, some meaningless numbers. When the common cold is more infectious, flu is more infectious, there are many, many things that we should be measuring in this country that Indians are much more susceptible to. And so the raw numbers itself shouldn't be a cause for us to overreact and start locking down and causing more hardship to the country than has already happened, because it hasn't worked the past 2 times we tried it. But from a hospitalization perspective, I can say that we're as prepared as we can ever be. There really is nothing much more you can do for the next month. And so we'll take it as it goes.
Viren, are you getting a lot of queries on boosters? I think that's the big concern in everyone's mind, even though we don't know yet if the data supports a booster shot for the vaccines that we have available. But are you prepping yourself up for that?
The global consensus so far is that boosters do provide some protection for those who are immune compromised, slightly older people, and those, if they record the antibody levels, who have taken shots and they turn to be a lot lower. There is definite evidence to show that it helps. And from those categories of people, we are getting inquiries. But so far, since we haven't received any direction on what actually to do around the boosters, we are waiting for it. It can't hurt, but I wouldn't say it's a tremendous amount of help to open up boosters to everyone either. Because then what will happen is that people may unnecessarily get revaccinated for those that really do not need it. So maybe some guidelines and protocols around certain people that would benefit from that would be helpful. But overall, I would say the queries are coming, but there may not be a pressing need right now, but it may happen.
You know, Professor Reddy, I just want your take on boosters, because I understand the supply-demand problem. I understand the equity problem. You should cover everyone instead of some people. But is there enough data, let's just talk about data, not the morals of it, to show that we do need boosters to protect against Omicron? And there must be some reason why so many countries are going in for boosters, why the United Kingdom, for example, has mandated them.
Well, in places where mRNA vaccines have been principally used, the immunity conferred by mRNA, particularly Pfizer, and even of Moderna to some extent, fades very fast. The initial boost in immunity is very high, but Pfizer from the 5th month and Moderna even after the 6th month, the fade out of immunity is fairly fast, and that's why they've been resorting to boosters. Now, for the other types of vaccines which use different platforms like the virus vector vaccine, we still do not have clear-cut data about the speed of fade out. But the boosters have been shown to be useful, particularly where mRNA has been used, and even against Omicron, the boosters have been shown to be useful in providing better immunity. However, I entirely agree with Mr. Shetty that we must prioritize the people who are immunocompromised, who are elderly, and therefore are much more vulnerable to severe disease if infected. If Omicron itself, in most people, results in relatively mild infection, there is no hurry at all to give the entire general population of adults boosters. Now, if it's a question of triage, of whether you complete your vaccination for people who are hitherto not even vaccinated properly, or extend boosters to those who are at higher risk of clinical disease, that entirely depends upon the supply situation. If the supplies are reasonably adequate, there is no reason to have a wait and watch policy. We can actually do both simultaneously. On the other hand, if there are a large number of vulnerable people in the 45 plus age group who are still to be properly immunized, then we should focus our attention on them, remembering that Omicron is here, but Delta has not fully gone away either.
But you know, the people who are doing the supplying, the vaccine makers, have all applied for clearances to give boosters. Serum Institute has, so has Bharat Biotech. They want to use their nasal spray as a booster. My question to you, Dr. Ishwar, as an infectious disease expert, is that will the booster of the same vaccine work when the original vaccine was made for the Wuhan variant, so to speak, of the virus? And the Omicron is quite a different virus in itself. So, do we know enough to assume that boosters will even work?
No, you see, this mix and match concept started only in Omicron and Delta or COVID for that sense. So I think booster usually earlier was first dose, second dose booster or annual vaccine as we have been using in influenza. So I don't think that it is related to Omicron. Booster is a separate chapter by itself. What we need to look at is who should be given booster, when it should be given, and whether mix and match will work better. But there are no trials in India. There is one trial going at the CMC Vellore, which is a mix-up of Covishield and Covaxin and vice versa. And that trial result will come out only in the end of January or February. Till such time, there are some trials going on. They should add the kind of bridge trial with the booster trial, which are not being done. So I think we should first look at where are the other vaccines. On paper, we have 7-8 vaccines available. When you go, there are only 2 vaccines available. Sputnik V is first dose is separate, second dose is different. It is not available. And J&J, Moderna, license to Cipla, it is not available. Corbevax is already paid for 30 crore doses to be made available from August onwards. 4 months are over, it is not available. So I think we should look at all this thing and whether booster can work amongst itself. Universally, they said that mRNA is the best booster or best or universal booster. In India, there is a mRNA vaccine which has done very well on the first and second trial. Trial 3 results are yet to be out, and that can be used as a booster, but they need to do trial. So without trial, we cannot say that mixing up with this will work or not. But in any case, if mRNA has worked somewhere, it will work here also.
Sure. So we're some way off. So we're some way off in getting boosters. The key takeaway is that we need not panic and go into restrictions. And frankly, the big fear right now is that of restrictions. We've been through the worst with the second wave. Hopefully, we won't have a situation like that with the Omicron. It's pointing to milder symptoms as of now, at least, even though it's much more infectious. The question is, will we be able to keep the numbers down without restrictions? Because that is what will really harm people as well in the long run. On that note, I want to thank all of you for joining us on the discussion today as we look at the latest coming in on the Omicron.